If it's okay if not too. Mike, you saw it as well. Norm, you did. Awesome. Okay. Not as well. Yeah, okay. So a bunch of people have, looks like. John, yep. Awesome. Thank you. I apologize I can't pronounce your name because it's in Cyrillic, but you acknowledged. Alan, thank you. Helen, yeah. Scott, awesome. Yeah. Sweet. Okay. That's excellent. So yeah, lots of you have seen that, which is perfect. We'll talk about those tools again and how we address them with Wrinkles. I just scheduled another workshop for not next week, but the week that follows as well. And it's going to be a sort of introductory workshop to layers and layer functionality. That's more directed at people who haven't worked with layers extensively, and we'll talk about like some of the new tools for like selections and masking, etc., that we've introduced over the last couple releases, but specifically with 2025 in mind. So that's live. You can sign up for that there. Richard asked, will these procedures require Windows 11 or GPU 12 or more? No, all the so no, we don't. It doesn't need Windows 11. You can use Windows 10 for this if you want. A lot of the tools that we're looking at right now are do use your sort of like your computer's operating system. If you have a graphics card, ACDSee 2025 just switched to sort of offloading a lot of the responsibility for editing on the graphics card. So it's better at utilizing that system than previous versions. I don't really know the limitations of the particular tools we're using today, but none of them are that intensive on the GPU. It's not like we're doing, you know, uh, uh, like some sort of AI functions where it's going to require it to sort of scan these images. And so, no, it's just sort of like point and click, repairs, that sort of thing. I don't know if that answers your question, Richard, but I don't know the specific tool requirements for like the GPU or the CPU. But long story short is if you have a graphics card in your computer, the most recent version of ACDSee uses that. So it takes a lot of the strain and stress away from your computer's processing unit and puts it onto the actual graphics processing unit. So I'm assuming for most users too, for PC, like fairly common that you'd have at least a rudimentary graphics card, unless you're working on like a laptop, but even laptops have fairly robust graphics cards these days. So Key asked, I try to hide permanent issues and generally clean up acne. Nice. Otherwise, unless otherwise requested, totally. Teens are acne problems, other things are requested. Yeah, this is something too that like when we talked about in the previous workshop, I'm assuming you attended that too, Key, but it's like, yeah, a lot of those I think take away from I don't know, this is a hard thing to say, but it's like a lot of those elements kind of take away from the subject matter. And so I remember professional photographers that used to do like, school photography and that sort of thing. It was very common for them to ask their clients if they wanted those things to be removed. Additionally, there is like a certain degree of consent that I think when you're working with clients that's a good thing to ask and say, hey, like how do you feel about me, doctoring images in these ways and such. But I don't know, certain clients it might be just kind of a expected rather than the something that you'd ask about. But anyway, that's all up to you. That's one of those things where it's like pretty dependent or pretty what's the word for it? It's just all part of one particular workflow and like the benefits of going through one particular photographer versus another. Okay, let's begin. Let's start talking about it today here, folks. So yeah, just to reiterate, we're talking about crow's feet and wrinkles today. So this, just to clarify, I guess at the top, what we mean by that, if we don't know what those two terms mean. I mean, crow's feet are these little lines that appear next to a person's eyes, especially as they get older and their skin becomes less taut. They are sort of very common among older individuals. And then wrinkles, I mean, I feel like that's fairly self-explanatory, but that's this the like line patterns and stuff like that on the skin. We'll probably also look at the under eye as well. Some individuals might have like lines that appear under the eyes as well. So when we're looking at addressing this, there's three tools there's like a fast tool, a medium tool, and a more in-depth tool. And the degree to which that these are thorough measures is predicated on sort of the time that's involved. So just a base level, I'm sure most of you people are familiar with, and we won't spend much time on it, but the skin tune tool is a overall sort of generalized smoothing tool that applies glow and smoothing adjustments to faces on your image. That's too much glow. So as I increase this smoothing function, there's essentially like a marginal blur that's occurring in these areas that's sort of looking to address that. This is a pretty extreme effect, I would say. I think that it has a tendency to sort of like make images look a little bit like almost dewy and kind of like a little bit too soft. So in some images, just even increasing smoothing just slightly might really benefit an image. But when you're working with more intense like lines and stuff like that in the face, the amount of smoothing that you would need to apply in order to see a meaningful adjustment to it might be a lot. In which case, you're probably looking at these images and seeing what I'm seeing, where okay, well, you're losing so much color. There's quite a bit of loss in the image. So there's places for this. And also keep in mind, this is a general application. I'm not like using the brush in this case to sort of brush on just in the particular areas that I want, but this is something that we can use to address. That being said, it's a pretty one-stop shop for its adjustments. So just to showcase this, this is a filter. So filters appear on the left-hand panel here, and you can see that Skin Tune appears somewhat near the top of the listing. Important thing to note when interacting with images in edit mode is that these filters that appear on the left-hand side are functionally destructive changes. And what I mean by that is if you're really familiar with develop mode, you'll know that whenever you adjust any image using any tool in develop mode, you can enter back into that image at a later date and adjust those values and those metrics even after those have been completed, right? And so that is a fully non-destructive mode. Develop mode is something where any change can be adjusted. Edit mode has non-destructive elements and destructive elements. And how we differentiate between these two things, or at least one of the easiest ways that I find to differentiate between those things, is that I say to people, the layers panel and the adjustment layers panel, these on the right here, where we see, the layer order and the adjustment layers that appear beneath it, these are changes that are non-destructive. And so what I mean by that, caveat, when we're working in edit mode, to get a non-destructive file, we have to save our file as an ACDSee file format. This is our editable file format. Otherwise, we're flattening the image. But when we're working in edit mode on our image, if I save my image as an ACDSee file and my file comprises mostly of layer and adjustment layer adjustment layer changes to my image, that image will be predominantly non-destructive. Now, when we're working with filters, filters are all destructive changes. And what I mean by that is let's just quickly do, I don't know, let's just do something. Let's do a quick liquefy adjustment. When I do a liquefy adjustment on my image here, I just move my image around, right? When I have completed this liquefy change, right? This is now altered permanently. And so even if I was to save this file as an ACDSee file, my original sort of image of my individuals here is not listed in that layer order and therefore isn't saved when I save the file. So what I typically do when I'm working with files in edit mode is I typically make a duplication of my file. And what this does is it means that even when I'm interacting with filters that are going to save over the image, I still have a reference file of the original image that I can save along with that ACDSee file that opens it up and allows me to use this moving forward. So what I'm describing is not necessary. You don't need to do this, but it's a workflow suggestion, okay? And that workflow suggestion is to enable you to come back to these images in the example that we're talking about today, we're working with people's faces, right? We're taking and we're removing things like wrinkles and such. And in the event that we maybe have a client that doesn't want that, but we've already produced it, we are at least going through the process of saving it as we go. So we're saving our progress. So that's the skin tune tool. And so when I use something like skin tune on my image here, as a smoothing adjustment, that's a general application that's being applied to this. And then this part of my image here is permanently altered, right? So there's my skin tune image. And then there's my original image that appears beneath, right? So there's my layer order here. Now, face edit is another tool that's sort of more particular for addressing this issue. There's some sort of limitations that come with it, and we'll look at what those are. I'm just going to duplicate this, and we'll show the face edit tool. So here we have our original. I'll rename that too. I have my skin tune adjustment, which is, again, kind of lossy, as I've described. And then the face edit, which we're about to do. So under the AI panel in the filter menu, I have the face edit tool. I haven't talked about this tool in ages. I'm just realizing it's been a long time. This was introduced like 2 or 3 ACDCs ago. How many people, just out of curiosity, just a yes or no, how many people have used face edit before? Just because I haven't talked about it too extensively in workshops. So I'm just wondering if people understand how to use it. Mike has, that's good. He has, yes. Not has not. John has not. I have quite often. Okay, good. Richard, no. So yeah, pretty mixed bag, it sounds like. Yes and no's. So for some of you, this will be a little bit reiterative, and for some of you, this will be brand new. Lots of no's. Okay. So face edit is an AI tool. Okay. And so you're probably asking, okay, well, how is it an AI tool? It works much the same way that our people mode does. For those of you that have used people mode, in ACDSee, people mode is a tool that sort of scans your images for faces. And then it runs, so there's a face detection. So it's searching to see if there's a face in your image at all. Landscape photographies, for example, don't have faces, right? Typically. And then there's a face recognition process. And so face detection and recognition are 2 different processes. The recognition is to search for images that you have determined to be specific people and then have named them. So if you've named somebody, for example, if this gentleman here has been named Jack, people mode will look through my entire repertoire to see if there's people that look like Jack in my images. And then what it does, if it's certain that it's Jack, it'll name it Jack. And if it's uncertain that it's Jack, what it'll do is it'll give me the opportunity in people mode to suggest like, oh, that may be Jack or that might not be Jack. So that's kind of the function there. And one of the things that that we can address, right, in people mode is sort of that recognition of faces. And so what we did when we introduced AI face edit is we took that system and we basically plotted it onto this sort of mapping of people's faces. And so what we have here is we have this sort of example of like where we see the contours of a face. So the mouth and the nose and the eyes and the eyebrows, and then the overall chin here. This tool is really, really good when it comes to one person in my image. And it's typically better at seeing like sort of a face forward or profile style faces. Here we have a woman who has her face cocked, as you can see, slightly to the left. And one of the things we'll notice is actually it didn't determine that this person, in this case, our Jack example here, has a face at all. And so we have a system where skin AI face edit didn't do a really good job at like finding the face in this particular image. And it's because of the conditions of the image itself. Now, if we take another photo as an example, so I'll just discard this and we'll open up this image and bring it into face edit. You'll see that this probably is going to have its faces plotted a bit better. So you can see that there's a certain degree of like success and failure ratio with the face edit. I personally think this has a lot to do with the quantity or number of people in an image. In this image, you can see that it's actually successfully plotted both of my subjects. So here's my man here, and when I click on the AI face edit tool, I have my man plotted here, and then I have my woman plotted here. So when I open the software, or sorry, when I open up AI Face Edit, what it's doing is it's plotting my faces on my image, and it's sort of correlating them to, in this case, like the eyebrows, the nose line, the eyes, the mouth, and then the chin. And so what Face Edit is going to do is it's going to use these points when we want to make adjustments to my image, of which there's a lot. So for example, you can see that there's whole tabs here dedicated to the shape of the face, dedicated to the eyes, both the size and shape of the eyes, the eyebrows themselves, the nose, mouth, skin, and makeup. So there's a lot here to play with. But in this case, I have a image where I was both my subjects here were captured with this correctly. Versus, again, we'll just navigate away when we look at an image where there's one subject. So I'll just give this one as an example. The software is going to have a very easy time establishing where those AI points, rather than maybe a degree of success that might success where there might be multiple people involved. So let's sort of illustrate some of these tools. I think this is a really good example of a photograph where we can sort of explore the, I guess in this case, the crow's feet and wrinkle suggestions. Also, I did want to say, I did see, where's that question? I will show you, Mike, later on how to remove red eyes. We actually have a whole tool for that. It's called red eye reduction. There's lots of different ways to remove red eye reduction. You can use that simple binary tool. Or if you're ever curious, you can always use the white balance tool and slide your temperature in the opposite direction. So we'll talk about that at the end of the workshop. Okay. Because it's not what we're talking about today, but it is useful. So I have my subjects here, and I want to just see how Face Edit interacts with these subjects. And one of the things I'll say right now is in between this, what I'm about to showcase, this AI Face Edit, I think is really in between the Skin Tune tool. The Skin Tune tool, like I said, is quite extensive in terms of its effect, and it's a very general application. So it's not being as particular with its adjustments as the AI Face Edit tool. And then what we'll go on is to look at frequency separation in these areas in the same way that we did 2 weeks ago in my frequency separation video. And we'll explore how frequency separation, I think, is the most robust tool to remove these wrinkles, but it's also a bit more time consuming. So we're going to give you 3 sort of examples of how to address this issue. So why don't we start with her? So again, I'm going to look at those AI points. I don't need to move these. They're pretty accurate. There's no major adjustments needed. The eyes are in the correct place. The general contour around the jawline is correct. Eyebrows, mouth, all in the same place. And then when we look at our gentleman here, pretty close, right? So it's done a pretty good job. When we go into the Edit Face tool, there's all these different functions, like I mentioned, but the ones that just for expediency sake and time's sake, the one that we're actually concerned about is skin, right? So we have our woman here. We have her selected. So we know that because she's selected in this gray box up at the top here. And then the 2 that we're interested in, right? We're interested in looking at wrinkles. So I think when we're talking about wrinkles here, it's going to be looking at the ones that are underneath the eyes here, but I'll just verify that. Yeah, so as I increase this meter here, you can see that those areas are smoothed. Very similar to the way that we did smoothing in the Skin Tune tool, right? But as we increase these, you can see that it's just dedicated to underneath the eyes. If I increase smoothing here, what it's going to do is it's going to increase smoothing in the skin areas that it's associated with this woman here. And then I can look at addressing crow's feet here as well. And so as I increase this meter here, you can see that the areas next to the eyes start to get a bit smoother looking. So the other thing that's worth noting is if I only have one side of my image that's in focus, or sort of one crow's feet, for example, that's in focus, what I can do is I can actually deattach this slider by unclicking it or unlocking it. And that gives me the ability to just focus on one side of my, hopefully everyone could see that when I crank the slider back and forth, but it's no longer attached. Excuse me. So I can increase those values or decrease those values as I see fit. In this particular image, what I may want to do is I might want to just slightly address, let's see if there's any other thing we can do here. I don't think that there's going to be any more that I can use to address this. Glow is going to be, yeah. So I think, and then the smoothing looks at, yeah, the smoothing is the tool to address the circumference or circular aspect of the face. So while this is able to sort of really dial back the effect on those crow's feet and the under eye here, and it's also been able to address sort of a bit of smoothing on the face here. You can see that this does leave that a little bit of lines on my image here. So this is like, I think, a pretty, let's see, I'll zoom out and we can see a little before and after and what it looks like. So if I zoom out, here's my before image and here's my after image. And you can see, much like the effect of skin tune, there is a little bit of loss. It looks like there's a little bit of loss in the eyebrows here with this effect in terms of the color contrast. And then, there's the effect of smoothing an image, right? Which is a custom choice, a choice we make to our image. And as such, we're starting to see that effect apply. That being said as well, this effect is also not that egregious. It's like a pretty light effect on the face, and it's preserved much of the natural lines on her face to not make this seem like out of place or even that jarring, right? Same effect will apply to him here. I'm just going to choose him this time, and we'll do the same thing. We'll just do the wrinkles left and right. Let's see here. Oh, maybe what I'll do is I'll reattach these. And I'll just bring that in until they look a little bit smoother. And I'll pull the crow's feet over as well. And then I'll just do a general smoothing, which is maybe it will address that area as well. And so that's like I'm comfortable with that effect. So if we show the previous here, I'll just zoom out for a moment now. So if we show, well, maybe I'll reduce the smoothing a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So we show the before and after. This is the before, and then based on the decision that we wanted to address these wrinkles and crow's feet, we would look at something like that. And it hasn't really disrupted the image too much. It is subtle enough for this image in terms of its application. So just to reiterate how AI Face Edit works, basically what it's going to do is it's going to use already pre-existing AI functions like searching for face recognition. And then based on that, what it's going to do is it's going to plot these points. And once these points are plotted, it gives you the ability to interact with so many different functions. So in this case, what we have here is we have skin functions that we're addressing because we're looking at crow's feet and wrinkles. But it has taken it has applied a huge effect, right? It looks like Norm said it looked like it knocks 20 years off their age. Yeah, and it's like, Norm, just to, if we're addressing this guy, if we want to, add 10 years, well, then we would just slide these measures down, So this is a tool that is useful for images, I think, that have, in this case, our subjects that we want to address. And we want to look at those particular parts of the faces. This is going to be much less general of an application than the smoothing tool or the the skin tune tool. And the benefit we get from that is that we can work with individual parts of the face. The one thing I would say is that there is going to be some degree of issue because it uses AI functionality and AI is not perfect. There will be situations where perhaps, like when we're working with an image here, right, where it might not capture certain people in my image here. Let's see if it even captures. Oh, it does. Okay, so it was able to capture both people in this image, right? So there is some degree of success and failure with that. And then what we can do is we can re-navigate and move these plotting points as we see fit. And that gives us the ability to interact with these individuals' faces. So that being said, we have two tools. So we have the first tool, we have the skin tune tool, and we now have the AI face edit tool as a means to address wrinkles in our image. Let's talk about the third one, which is frequency separation. So I've talked about this in the previous workshop. We'll look at it again. Rather than looking at blemishes, we'll address wrinkles. So I have my subject here. This is a great photo, actually. This is perfect for what I'm talking about here. And what we're going to do is we're going to address this area, this area, this area, this area, and some of the wrinkles on the forehead. And to do this, we need to use a tool called frequency separation. What frequency separation does is it takes your image and it splits it into two. I'll show that 1 second. To open up frequency separation, we'll right click on our image and we'll click on frequency separation here. Frequency separation, what it will do is it'll turn our image into what I'm going to call a texture file and one that is a color file. And so what I mean by that is we're seeing previews of what these two things look like here. So I have my low frequency or a low pass layer. And what this low pass layer is it's a predominantly displayed color and it contains very little sort of quick delineations between bright and dark. So areas of high contrast are not really its focus. Whereas for the high frequency layer or high pass layer, right, areas of contrast change is the focus. So we're not seeing any color at all, or we shouldn't be seeing any color. Rather, what we're seeing is areas where the texture matters, right, where there's a quick delineation between dark and white, or dark and light. So when I'm interacting with this tool, what I want to do is I want to make sure that my blur radius captures the most texture as possible without letting color seep through. So if my blur radius was a lot lower, you can see that some of the color in my image is starting to seep through. Note that my eyes that I'm seeing here, a little bit of pink. I'm seeing the pink in her face, that sort of thing. And if I scroll out, you can see a bit of a blue on the shirt. So this would be inappropriate for what we're trying to do. So what we want to do is we want to lower this blur radius until we start to see mostly textural differences. So in this case, I'm looking at this, and there's still a little blue that comes through, but you can see that effect of the sort of taupish pink is no longer visible in my image, and that's ideal. That's what we want. So my blur radius in this case was approximately 16, and it's going to take my image and it's going to split it into these two different files, and we'll talk about those. So I'm going to click done. And as you can see here, I have two images that appear above my image right here. A note that, just like I described earlier, I always make a duplication of my image, hey? I always duplicate my image and then I work off that duplication. So when we go to frequency separate an image, what it's going to do is it's going to split it in two, and it's going to remove, I guess in this case, do a destructive change to the original image. So that's why I always want to make a duplication. So let's just quickly rename these. So I'll go, this is my original, right? And then this one is my, what we're going to call my low pass layer or smooth layer. Or actually, let's go color. That's a better descriptor. And then we'll got our high pass layer, which we're going to call texture. So we have these two things and they're split into two layers. And as you can see, based on the thumbnail preview, that actually matches what we were doing when we looked at the frequency separation tool. Okay. I'm going to hide my original. I don't need it. And we're going to look at the low pass layer. So you can see my low pass layer here. I have the high pass layer hidden and the bottom layer hidden as well. Note that when I hover over my high pass layer, that there is a blend mode that is being applied, right? And so what that means is this layer has a linear light blend effect that when it's active, creates the culmination of our original image. So this is being blended on the low pass layer, which has no blend mode itself. And the result of that is these two images become my original image, or the culmination of these two images are my original image. Really important detail. When we're interacting with our image, what we want to do is we want to interact with these images individually, okay? And we'll look at that. The first image that we're going to deal with is this low pass layer, and our intention here is to simply blur the areas that we don't like. Okay, that's all we're doing. So I'm going to take this image here, and we're just going to address her face as described, right? And all I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the blur tool. And again, blur is destructive, right? Because it's in the filter menu. So we just want to make sure that we're aware of that. And then I'm going to click on my brush tool, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a Gaussian blur. By default, Gaussian should be the application that you'll see. There's a bunch of different blur methods, and this one is the Gaussian blur one. So we have a brush tool set, Gaussian blur, and the effect is, I don't know, about 60-ish. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the process of brushing this on. You can use the blur adjustment layer. Let me just think. You would have to use it. Yeah, you could use the blur adjustment layer as well, for sure. As long as you make sure that that blur adjustment appears above the color layer. In this case, Mike. I'll just go through, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten these areas up. I'll take a look at the top of the wrinkles here as well. And then I'll do the right-hand side, and I'll just take out those little crow's feet right there. So when I've done that, you can see when I scroll out, so here's the change. This is the before, and that's the after. So it's just a gentle blur around the underside of her eyes and the crow's feet there. Okay. I'm going to click done. And what it's going to do is it's going to apply that adjustment. But it's going to apply that adjustment only to the color layer. What's going on here? There we go. Mike said, "Hey, why don't you just do this as a blur effect in adjustment layers?" So what that would look like is you can add a blur, and then it's sort of beyond the topic of today, but you would have to interact with the blur layer by using the mask. I'm going to talk about masking pretty extensively in my next workshop, but what this would look like is you would probably want to make sure that your mask is black. And then you'd want to paint on the areas that you want to affect on your image. The other thing you'd want to do when you're interacting with an adjustment layer is you want to make sure that your layer is clipped to the image that appears beneath it, which in the case of the low pass layer, which in the case of this blur is the low pass layer. I don't want you to focus on this too much because this is just an alternative method to do what we're doing here. But just note that it is possible and that Mike's suggestion is true. You can use adjustment layers to do that. It just requires several other steps to gain a degree of non-destructiveness. In this case, though, we don't need to do that. We're just going to explore this tool in a little bit more depth. So I have my low pass layer. And now what you'll notice that because we've blurred that under eye lines and such, when I go to apply this texture layer, that again is the high pass layer. So that's what this looks like, right? When we go to blend this on top of our low pass layer, you'll see that the effect of those wrinkles is extremely reduced. So what I mean by that is, let's see if I can show us saved. So this is the original, right? And this is the effect of just the low pass layer being changed. Okay, just the blurring. So I want to take a pause and stop here. This just affecting the low pass layer using the blur tool is a really strong way of adjusting wrinkles in your image without doing anything egregious to the image. This is letting the person's face kind of like sing a little bit while preserving their age and like preserving a way to like it really does a good job of maintaining their natural beauty while just underscoring, just underscoring a little bit the effect of those lines. Okay? So again, just before and after, right? It's such a subtle change, but it's already like taken, not necessarily, it's not like removed the age on the image per se, because she's still her age, but it's drawn attention away from it. So I want you to be aware that when you're using the frequency separation tool, you don't need to go all the way like we're about to. You can stop here. And this is a really good way of like allowing your subjects to maintain their sort of agency in their age, whatever you want to call it. We're just trying to be a little bit sensitive because like we don't necessarily need to like completely change someone's face in order to make them, feel good and look good, right? Anyway, so note that, okay? Just interacting with the low pass layer and then applying the texture layer of their sort of their wrinkles on top of it gives a reduced effect while still allowing them to be visible. Okay, that being said, now let's address the sort of other aspect of that, and that's the high pass layer. So we can do adjustments to both, and we talked about this when it comes to like facial blemishes like zits and that sort of thing in the previous workshop. And we can do that here too, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this high pass layer and I'm going to make sure that I have it selected, okay? This is really important because I don't want to be working on my low pass layer. I want to be working on my high pass layer. A selected layer is literally just the layer that's a lighter gray. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into the repair tool. And when I'm in the repair tool, I'm going to use the blended clone tool. And so what I'm interacting with now is, oh, you know what? We see the color. We don't necessarily want to. Let's just interact with this layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the blended clone tool to just literally remove the wrinkles. Blended clone is one of those tools where it wants you to set a beginning point with your right mouse button. And then all it wants you to do is draw on that effect. So it's going to use your set point as a reference. And then when you click on your image, it's going to use that reference to sort of fill the content of what you're cloning the area with. Again, I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to remove these couple lines here. And as I said earlier, you don't need to do this, but you certainly can add to our image here. And we've removed those lines. So that was a pretty quick and easy process. And now my image, now she has no wrinkles. There's a little bit of lines on the inside there, but I wouldn't want to address those just because they get quite close to the line. But as you can see, this is what our image looks like before and after. So there you go. That's a low pass layer change and a high pass layer change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate that one more time. Because I'll do it on a different image here. But so we've taken our image and just simply addressed the color or blurred the color layer, and we've taken the blended clone tool and addressed some of the lines that we didn't want, the textural lines on my image. So that looks really good. I'm actually going to save this file as say editable. And as I saved it, now I can come back to this in again. So maybe what we'll do is we'll use Mike's suggestion on our next image and we'll do it using layers. So but just to stop for a moment now, so we've looked at the skin tune tool as an extremely generalized change on people's faces to address wrinkles. We've looked at the face edit tool and how it's like a really quick and easy function to change wrinkles on people's faces. The only limitation there is that sometimes multiple faces are not properly mapped using the AI. It has a much higher degree of success rate for single faces. And then what we looked at is we looked at frequency separation as the most in-depth way to address wrinkles, but you're interacting with tools like layers and stuff like that. And so we're interacting with a system that we have to understand. So there's the one-stop shop method, there's the sort of several stop shop method, and then there's the full I work at the grocery store now, let's have a look at this guy's face as well as a means to addressing this issue. So I have my image here. What I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to duplicate my image. I'll just name my original. And then I'll go about frequency separating this particular size of a side of the image here. And we'll reduce the radius because it looks like a little bit of color is coming through. Ooh, a little bit more. Maybe about 11. Yeah, that's perfect. So I've gone in, I've applied frequency separation, and as you can see, I have my, so I guess my color layer here, and then I have my texture layer that appears above it. So earlier Mike was like, hey, why don't you do this effect, the blurring section effect, using adjustment layers? And we absolutely can, so we'll address this. So I'm going to take my layer here, I'm going to add a blur adjustment, okay? And then I want my blur adjustment to not be generalized. I need it to be specific. So in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to take my existing mask here, and I actually need to invert my mask. What this does is masks are sort of delineated by on and off. They're turned on and off by a representation of white or black. So if my mask is black, it indicates to me that the effect that's being applied is being applied in such a way that it is turned off, right? Versus if it's white, it means the effect is on or it's turned on. And so when we're generally interacting with adjustment layers, we're often applying a change to our whole image. But in this case, we don't want to do that. We want to apply a change to a particular part of my image. And so the way that we address that, the way that we interact with that, is we have to use this mask here. We have it selected. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually use something like the brush tool here in combination with the white foreground color. And what that white foreground color does is it actually is kind of simple, but it paints on the effect. So if I click on my image here and I brush on my file here, you can see that that effect is being applied, right? And you can see that it's being applied in this area. And what this indicates to me is that when I look at my thumbnail, right, although it's very small and it's probably not that easy to see, you can see there's that little white spot in there. And what that tells me is that application, this white area in my thumbnail, corresponds to the area of my image that it's turned on, or where the effect is being applied. So when interacting with masks, we want to make sure that if we want the effect to be applied, that we have a white foreground color that we're working with in order to apply that. That being said, I'm going to actually erase this by right-clicking because I want the opacity to be reduced. It's too strong of an effect. So I'm just going to scroll in. That's way better. Way, way, way better. And I'll apply that change. And maybe I'll take in the eyes a little bit as well. There we go. So that change has been applied. We've blurred my layer now, right? This is exactly the same as using the blur tool on my my low pass layer, or color. In this case, we'll rename it again, but this is our low pass layer. That's the same as doing a blur to your low pass layer. Whereas this one would be, let's rename it high pass. So now when we turn on our high pass layer, once again, okay, so you can see once again that this layer is being blended with the layer that appears beneath it, which in this case is the low pass layer with the blur applied. So if we show saved, you can see that that was our original image, right? Super strong, really, really delineated, big wrinkles on the crow's feet. And this is the effect of that reduced, right? All we've done is blur the low pass layer. And we've really taken down those wrinkles, right? And the beauty of this that Mike described earlier is if we want to keep adding content to this space, we can do that by just brushing on white over top of this blur layer here. So if I'm like, oh, I actually want to take in that effect in the wrinkles on the forehead, you can see referencing my thumbnail now that the top area has been applied, and the same area to the right here has been applied. Now, some limitations in this case is that there is no way to repair there's no way to repair non-destructibly. So the high pass layer, if I really wanted to address the texture of those wrinkles here, right? The only way I can do that is actually by opening up the repair tool. So if I wanted to take these out, I would have to use that. In fact, we'll do that really briefly here. Just to example on the right-hand side, we'll just take out this area here. But there's no way to do this non-destructively, so we just have to kind of address it that way. I'll take that out. I'll just take that out. And let's see. And then when I apply those effects, you can see they're gone. I definitely would want to clean that up a little bit better because I did a pretty quick job on it, but you can see the final effect there. And again, this is nowhere near as blurry or as like as a binary of effect as with the skin tune tool or the face edit tool, because we're using a really robust method to change these things. So that covers it for this workshop today, folks. What we talked about is wrinkles and crow's feet. And we examined it in 3 different methods based on the degree to which we wanted to be involved or the speed at which we wanted to engage with it. The fastest way to address any form of wrinkle is to use the skin tune tool. However, there is some degree of loss that's going to occur there. The next tool we looked at is the face edit tool. And the face edit tool is a really good way of addressing crow's feet and wrinkles in our image. The only thing is that there's going to be certain degrees of the effect is maybe blurring our that area a little bit too much, or we might struggle a little bit with images with multiple faces in it. Then we looked at the most thorough method, which is simply the frequency separation tool. And to use the frequency separation tool to blur the low pass and to repair tool the high pass. And we noted that simply blurring the low pass itself is often enough for our image. It's often enough to let the face pop and sing without drawing too much attention to the person's age, while still allowing them their age. You know, it doesn't completely remove it. It isn't such an egregious change. But this is such a strong tool. Yeah, I don't know. That covers it for today, folks. If anyone has any more questions, fire them off. I'm down to answer questions. We answered Mike's question earlier. Helen, thanks to you, ACDSee's Best, so much. You're gold for me. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I love doing these workshops. I like teaching people how to use the software, and I use it really regularly, so it's often nice. I come at it from more of a graphic design perspective, so a lot of the tools that I'm working with are more layer focused, but hopefully that's useful to some people. Not learned a lot. Thank you. Not sure I like the last one so much, but you do say it was a rough done example. Looks just like a shaved off size. Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I really expedited the process with the repair tool. My preference on this image. Let's see here. My preference on this image would be not to make any adjustments to the high pass here. And the reason why is because these lines are so thick. My preference here would be to just apply a blur to the low pass layer. That would be my preference on this image. That being said, I'm just trying to illustrate that you can still go through the process of repairing that part of your image. It just is going to require you to slow down a little bit and make sure that you're drawing from the relevant areas. Whenever you're working with a blended clone, right? The closer you can get, in this case, the closer you can get to a reference point to the area you're changing, the better. If I'm drawing a reference point from over here, it's going to look way worse than if I'm drawing a reference point from skin that is already moving in the same way, right? This is going to be the case in this area too. When I'm drawing a reference point right next door, it's going to have a much better effect than if I'm pulling from an area that's way further away. The blended aspect of this is going to be a bit easier on the software if we're doing it that way. So that's my point there. But yet again, like I said, I don't even think it needs it. I think you can just get away with just a simple low pass blur adjustment and it looks gorgeous. It's like such a subtle effect, but it's really taken out a lot of the severity in the original image. Anyway, you get my point. Okay. Mike, great workshop. Awesome. I'm so glad. Jack, thank you. Always more to learn. That's awesome. Sonia, thank you so much. Nice. It's Miller time. Excellent. Enjoy your Miller. George, thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, again, you can always fire them to me on the Connect page as well. Just my name and well, it'll appear in the host panel so you can see that. If you have any suggestions for the workshop, fire them that way. You're also welcome to fire them here. And otherwise, I have a nice workshop exclusively dedicated to layers, and that'll be in 2 weeks from now. Yeah, I'd love to see you there. So thank you so much, everybody. I might mute my mic. If anyone has any questions, just pop them. I'll be around for another 5 minutes. Okay.